During a family vacation, my mother snatched my purse and declared, "We'll be using your credit card for this trip." I smiled and said, "Then you'll love this message from the bank." She started screaming when she read it. That was the moment I knew this trip was about to go sideways. There she stood, in the middle of the airport terminal, clutching my purse like she had just won the lottery. Her face bore that smug look she always had when she thought she was getting her way. "We'll be using your credit card for this trip," she said, grinning as if she had pulled off the heist of the century. I smiled, so wide it probably unsettled her. And then I pulled out my phone, opened my banking app, and turned the screen toward her. "Then, you're going to love this message from the bank." Her expression shifted instantly. The color drained from her face as her eyes darted over the screen, and then she started screaming. But let's rewind a bit. I was raised in a family where saying no was never an option. Every fiber of my being screamed at me to refuse, but I knew if I did, I'd be painted as the selfish daughter who didn't care about her family. The guilt trips, the emotional manipulation, the constant phone calls. I knew exactly how it would play out. So, I agreed. But on one condition: I would book my own flight and hotel room. No shared accommodations, no way for them to access my money. I was going, but I wasn't going to let them take advantage of me. My mother hated that. She pouted, she whined, but she eventually let it go. Or so I thought. Fast forward to the airport. We had just landed, and I was already exhausted. I had spent the entire flight mentally preparing for whatever nonsense my mother was about to pull. Sure enough, as soon as we got to baggage claim, she made her move. She snatched my purse right out of my hands. "We'll be using your credit card for this trip," she said, all smug and triumphant. I didn't even flinch. I just smiled, pulled out my phone, and opened my banking app. Then I turned the screen to face her. Her eyes skimmed the message, then she read it again, and then she screamed. You see, I knew this was coming. I had learned years ago that my mother was relentless. She would pull stunts like this every chance she got, and I had spent a long time making sure she would never get another dime from me. A week before the trip, I called my bank and explained everything. The financial abuse, the manipulation, the lengths she would go to just to get access to my money. The bank rep was sympathetic but, more importantly, helpful. Together, we set up some very specific security measures. My card was locked to my location, meaning any charges made outside my immediate area would be flagged and declined unless I approved them through my banking app. For extra protection, I had my daily spending limit set to exactly $1. My mother stared at my phone, her fingers gripping my purse so tightly that her knuckles turned white. "What did you do?" she hissed. I shrugged. "Bank security. They thought it was weird that I suddenly had all these big charges coming from a place I hadn't been yet." Her face twisted in fury. "Fix it right now." But my mother wasn't the type to take defeat gracefully. She was already plotting. I checked into my hotel, feeling pretty proud of myself. My room was on a different floor from my parents', a deliberate move on my part. I needed space, a buffer. But the next morning, the real nightmare started. I woke up to banging on my door, not knocking. Banging like someone was trying to break it down. I groaned, rolled out of bed, and checked the peephole. It was my mother, and she was furious. I barely had time to brace myself before she started screaming through the door. "Open this door right now. We need to talk." I sighed, debating whether to pretend I wasn't in, but I knew her. If I ignored her, she'd just make an even bigger scene. So, I cracked the door open an inch, keeping the chain locked. "What?" She shoved a crumpled piece of paper through the gap. "The front desk says our card was declined. We can't check into our room. Fix it." I stared at her. "You didn't prepay?" She scoffed. "Why would we? We were planning to use your card, obviously." I wanted to laugh, so hard I cried. Instead, I handed the paper back. "Sounds like a you problem." She slammed her fist against the doorframe. "You think this is funny? Where are we supposed to sleep?" I shrugged. "Maybe you should have brought your own money." She lost it, screaming threats. The whole 9 yards. She accused me of abandoning my family, of humiliating her, of ruining the trip. Then I remembered. My father was just as guilty. He never stopped her, never stood up for me, never once told her she was out of line. I shook my head. "Not my problem." And then I closed the door in her face. But she wasn't finished. An hour later, my phone started blowing up. Calls, texts, voicemails. I ignored them all. Then came a knock on my door, a polite one this time. I checked the peephole. Not my mother, not my father. Hotel security. I sighed, knowing exactly where this was going. I opened the door. What's the issue? The security guy gave me a tight smile. Your parents are at the front desk. They're saying you stole their money and left them stranded. I laughed. A full, genuine laugh. You're kidding, right? He didn't laugh back. They're insisting you let them stay in your room. Oh, hell no, I said, crossing my arms. Do they have proof that I stole anything? He hesitated. Well, no, but... I cut him off. Then they're lying. I booked my own room. I paid for it with my own money. They tried to steal from me and now they're facing the consequences. That's not my problem. He looked a little uncomfortable. Look, I'm not trying to take sides, but they're saying they have nowhere else to go. The hotel is fully booked. I raised an eyebrow. Not my problem. Another voice chimed in from behind him. She's right. I leaned past security and saw the hotel manager standing there, a middle-aged woman with sharp eyes and the exhausted look of someone who had dealt with one too many entitled guests. She turned to me. I checked the system. You paid in full. Your parents, however, did not. If they can't provide another payment method, they'll have to leave. My mother's voice shrieked from down the hall, and just like that, they were gone. But my mother had one last trick up her sleeve. That night, I went down to the resort bar to grab a drink. I had just started to relax when my phone buzzed again. A notification from my bank. Attempted login from an unrecognized device. I sat up straight, my stomach dropping. Then another notification. Password reset requested. I felt my blood go cold. I knew exactly what was happening. I sprinted back to my room, locked the door, and pulled up my banking app. Sure enough, someone, I wonder who, had tried to reset my password. I immediately changed everything. New password, two-factor authentication, security alerts cranked to the max. Then I did something I should have done a long time ago. I called my bank and put a fraud alert on my account. And then I sent my mother a text. Nice try. Hope you enjoy the rest of your trip. No response. But the next morning, I got a call from my dad. She's saying you locked her out of the bank. I smiled. No, I locked me out of the bank. She just happened to be trying to break in at the time. Silence. Then he sighed. You know how she gets? Yeah, I said. And I'm done with it. And that's when I made my final move. I was done playing defense. It was time to go on the attack. I had spent my whole life letting my mother get away with things. She'd lie, manipulate, steal, always with the excuse that she was my mother and that family takes care of each other. But this, trying to break into my bank account, that was crossing a line even she couldn't excuse. So, I made a decision. I pulled out my laptop, logged into my accounts, and did something that would change everything. I froze my credit. That meant no new accounts could be opened in my name, no loans, no credit cards, nothing. Even I wouldn't be able to do it without going through layers of security. Then I pulled up my bank transactions, and that's when I found something disturbing. My mother had already gotten into my finances. There it was, a series of small withdrawals over the past 6 months. Nothing big, 20 here, 50 there, always spaced out just enough that I hadn't noticed. I felt sick. She must have found a way to access my account before this trip. Maybe she had gotten my card information from somewhere, or maybe she had convinced a bank teller she was acting on my behalf. Either way, I was done. I called my bank again, reported the fraud, and requested a full audit of every account in my name. I had them reissue my card, change my security questions, and block every single device that had ever accessed my account, even my own. It was nuclear-level security. Then I texted my mother. Hey Mom, just letting you know I found all the money you took. The bank is investigating now. Expect a call soon. The response came instantly. How dare you? We're family. I didn't steal anything. You're being crazy. I ignored it. I was already on to my next move. I called my dad. I knew he wouldn't defend me. He never did. But I needed to hear it from him. Dad, I said as soon as he answered. Did you know Mom was taking money from me? Silence. Then he let out a long sigh. She told me you were helping us out. I didn't ask questions. I closed my eyes. So you knew. More silence. Then he added, she told me you'd be fine with it. I let out a bitter laugh. Well, the bank isn't fine with it. His voice changed. Wait, what did you do? I reported it. Fraud. The bank is investigating. His breath hitched. You can't do that. I gritted my teeth. Watch me. Then came the biggest twist yet. An hour later, my sibling called me. They were younger than me by a few years, the golden child, the one my mother had always put on a pedestal. They never got treated like I did. So when I saw their name pop up, I hesitated. Then I answered. What? They hesitated too, then in a shaky voice said, she did it to me too. I sat up. What? I just checked my account. They whispered. She took money from me. A lot. Hundreds, maybe more. My stomach dropped. This wasn't just about me. She had been stealing from both of us. And that's when it hit me. She hadn't just planned to use my credit card for the trip. She had already drained whatever money they had brought. That's why she had no backup plan. That's why they had no way to pay for their room. She had burned through everything. And now she was screwed. Because if she thought I was a problem, she had no idea what was coming. My sibling wasn't like me. I had spent years trying to keep the peace, trying to handle my mother. But them, they didn't take betrayal well. And they were angry. Really, really angry. And that's when the real revenge started. After my sibling found out that our mother had stolen from them too, something in them snapped. They weren't like me. I had spent years trying to distance myself from our mother's control, carefully cutting ties without setting off a full-scale war. But my sibling? They had never been betrayed like this before, and when they realized she had used them, that she had drained their money just like she had tried to drain mine, they lost it. And I was right there with them. Let's end this, they said. I agreed. Step 1. Let her dig her own grave. We didn't say anything right away. We let my mother think she had gotten away with it. She was still fuming over the fact that I had locked her out of my accounts, but she had no idea that my sibling had found out about the stolen money. We kept our distance, ignored her calls, and let her panic. And sure enough, by the next day, she was desperate. She sent text after text. I don't deserve this treatment. I am your mother. You owe me respect. This is your fault for abandoning us. We have no money because of you. Classic manipulation. Then the big one. I called the bank and told them you made a mistake. They're going to unfreeze everything. I laughed out loud, because what she didn't know was that the bank had already flagged her name. I had spoken to the fraud department personally. They knew she was lying. But that wasn't even the best part. Step 2. Hit her where it hurts. While my mother was busy blowing up my phone, my sibling was working on something else, pulling up her entire financial history. And what they found? It was worse than we thought. Our mother wasn't just bad with money. She was in serious debt. Credit cards maxed out, late fees, personal loans. She was drowning, and she had been using our money to keep her head above water. She wasn't stealing just to take a vacation. She was stealing to survive. And she had no idea that we had found out. So we made a plan. Step 3. The trap. My sibling called her. I listened in on speaker. Mom, they said, their voice shaking just enough to sound real. I don't know what to do. I just checked my account and there's money missing. A lot of it. My mother did not miss a beat. Oh, honey, she sighed, fake sympathy dripping from her voice. That's terrible. Are you sure you didn't spend it on accident? My sibling played along. No, I didn't. I think someone stole from me. Oh, sweetie, don't worry, she said. I'll help you figure it out. I had to cover my mouth to keep from laughing. She was still lying. She was still pretending. She really thought she could talk her way out of this. That's when my sibling dropped the bomb. Well, The bank is already investigating. They're tracking where the money went, so I guess we'll know soon. Silence. Long, painful silence. Then my mother's voice changed. Hard, cold, panicked. You didn't have to do that. Why not? My sibling asked, voice completely innocent. If it's just a mistake, they'll fix it, right? More silence. Then, you ungrateful little brat. Bingo. Step 4. The public meltdown. We were done playing nice. My sibling went straight to the hotel manager. They explained everything. The stolen money, the fraud, the lies. They even showed proof that our mother had admitted to it in texts. And the manager, she was furious. Not at us, at my mother. Turns out, my mother had been causing problems all week, complaining, harassing the staff, demanding free perks because she was a loyal guest. The manager was more than happy to deal with her, so she called security and we got front row seats to the show. They found my mother at the pool, sipping a drink she definitely couldn't afford. And when security asked her to leave, she lost her damn mind, screaming, crying, throwing things. She called the staff names, demanded to see the hotel owner, even tried to fake a medical emergency to get sympathy. But it didn't work, because then the manager said the magic words, "Ma'am, the police have been called." And just like that, she went dead silent. She tried to run, literally run, but security stopped her. And my sibling. They looked her in the eye and said, "You did this to yourself." Step 5. The final blow. My mother was escorted off the property, banned from the hotel, humiliated in front of dozens of guests. And then she had to figure out how to get home. Because my dad, he was done. After everything, after seeing her try to destroy both of her kids, he finally snapped. He booked himself a separate flight home and left her stranded. She had no credit card, no money, no way to book a flight. And we enjoyed the rest of our vacation without her. The aftermath? When I got home, I followed through with the bank investigation. They confirmed it. She had stolen thousands from me and my sibling over the years. We pressed charges. And guess what? She got hit with fraud charges. The court forced her to pay back every penny. And when she couldn't, they froze her accounts. She lost everything. She called me crying, begging for help. I blocked her number. The sweetest revenge. Now, years later, my sibling and I are thriving. We have real financial security. We take vacations, ones we actually pay for. And my mother, she's still drowning in debt, still crying to anyone who will listen, still blaming everyone but herself. But we're free. And that is the best revenge of all.